Good afternoon. How are you on this Labor Day weekend? I guess there are so many issues we could talk about labor. I'm not going to do that. Collective bargaining. I'm in a state in which we attract employers because workers have no rights. They're at will. But that's a long story I didn't plan to get into today. But it is Labor Day, and it's 85 or so degrees, and the sun is out. And there's a nice breeze to offset that warmth, and that's the end of my Thomas Jefferson broadcast. There is a friend of mine when I was at Columbia. He was a talented playwright, among other things. His name was John Ford Noonan. And he talked about what actors could play what parts. I spent a lot of time talking about a lot of different subjects. But the way he saw it was an individual has certain colors. You know, it may be empathetic, it may be anger, it may be fierce, it may be scary. And he said, but an actor can only play to those colors, otherwise he's not genuine. And I think of two people in this context that seem maybe dissimilar when you start with it. One is Gorbachev. Years ago, my wife Holly and I, we figured out a way to go to Russia. And that in and of itself was an education, and it was before the mishigas that we've been going through ever since Trump took center stage after coming down the escalator at his golden home on Fifth Avenue, Trump Tower. I thought of several other words, and I couldn't decide which one was an apt way to describe it. Well, Gorbachev was a very interesting fellow. Seemed to have a scar on his crown that represented Russia in a way. Somewhat in the sketches, they would always show him with a symbol on his forehead. But he climbed up through the ranks of the Soviet Party, and he wanted to have reform, perestroika, it was called. And there was another reform he wanted, and it was glasnost, which was openness. Freedom of speech would be the closest, but it was in the Russian, it means publicity. But he was for having people argue and so forth. And it comes to mind because just the other day we had Biden give a speech, which I'll get into, and he was inviting hecklers to talk during his speech, which is unusual. I did that once in college. I was giving the speech and somebody was upset with me, and they threw vegetables at me, and I caught them and I threw them back and I hit the wrong person, so it became a laugh line in the speech. But Biden didn't do that, and it was a lot rougher for Gorbachev to do anything like that. But what he did do was he so reformed the Soviet Union, he ended it. He closed down the wall that separated East and West Germany. And I have been to Germany, and I've been to where the wall still is with openings there. It's been kept up there as a memorial to freedom and independence that will, over time, overcome all obstacles. And it did seem, however, that a catalyst for this change was Gorbachev. And of the few people that I could speak to when I was in Russia, there are those who support Gorbachev because they oppose Putin, and those who oppose Gorbachev because they support Putin. And it's a very strong thing, and there's a sadness about it because, to our way of thinking, putting aside, the Cold War and deciding that we'd won it by the fact that he was a reformer, I think misses the historical premise here, which is that good people can do good things even in very difficult situations. So I think Gorbachev, probably in years from now, will be described as the hero of the day. But we have a ways to go with Ukraine and other things to see what that is. So he had all the colors that John Ford Noonan would talk about. He had empathy, he had affection, he had independence, he had courage. All these different colors played through Gorbachev. Now, I'm not going to diminish Biden, but there are two colors that he has when he speaks. And as soon as I tell you them, you'll recognize them. It's not a criticism. It is where he is most comfortable and where he speaks, and he speaks all the time. And those who write for him, and I'm sure he revises it and so forth, but those who write for him, I'm sure they hear these two voices. One is the voice of empathy, of caring, the soul of the nation voice, that we have to come together, even as we are disunited and are apart, even as there is no way to compromise with those who are for an autocracy when we are fighting to preserve a democracy. Which takes us to the second voice. The first voice is a soft-spoken voice, confidential. He's letting you in on what he thinks. He's expressing almost in a whisper how the Republicans are failing us. Now the other voice is a loud voice, not quite angry, a warrior's voice. We're going into battle. We have to do something. All of us here, you're all with me. We're all in this together. We're all going to make a difference. And I think that's spectacular. And what about those who are the Republicans, who are not part of we the people? They have their own agenda, a self-serving one. And I turn to Jefferson, who wrote that when the revolution was coming, those who were not part of it, those politicians and those representatives, they were constrained by habit and despair. And Jefferson said they didn't have reflection and conviction. I think that describes our problem very clearly. Reflection and conviction. Now, reflection, what is that about? Thinking, thus the anti-intellectual strain in all these movements which seek a dictatorial end in which they're on top and you do what you're told and you lose your freedom and you lose your clear representations except as to a predictable outcome because we put our thumb on the scales of justice and we prevail because we cheat. And so that's reflection. A lack of conviction means they lack the values that founded this nation, that were not extant when the nation was founded. The words screamed out what we should do and who we should be, but we weren't there yet. And we weren't there in the Civil War. And we weren't there in the 60s. And we're still not there. But we've come a long way before this ogre came on the scene and said aloud the things that some Republicans apparently were whispering in the words that they used that hinted at who they really were. People who couldn't command a majority vote, so they had to make it a values war. They had to lie about the facts. They had to cheat at the ballot box. And they're with us today. And they're more open and more outrageous than we could have imagined before Trump. And this is the failure of democracy that strikes fear in the hearts of people who have convictions. Whereas these people, these Republicans, their only conviction is to have power, to be in charge, to give favors to their friends, to be hosted, to be given awards, undeserved, for things they've never done that fostered what America was and is all about. So, those are my thoughts today, my thinkings today. And the remaining point is the song of this fight is out there. It makes me think of that Irish expression that for Ireland, all the wars are merry and all the songs are sad. Well, our song is sad because it's just a song. We are not at war in a peacetime sense for the values that we espouse. Who in America, not the President of the United States, could get away with what Trump does and not be called on the carpet, not be interviewed, not be arrested? That's the failure of democracy. So, on Labor Day, if we want to be concerned about the worker, the woman having equal rights, the poor person getting a hand up until they can sustain themselves in the job they don't have, the food that they lack, the medical care they don't have, until all those things are taken care of, America is failing its people, and we have to change that. It will never change with the Republicans as they're now constituted. They are shameful and shameless. Nothing intimidates them because their course is so foul and so ignoble, and the only thing they want is the prize. So, that's our challenge on Labor Day and afterwards. And I might get around to doing a podcast tomorrow. I'm thinking about something. So, it's nice visiting with you. I hope it's bearably warm where you are and a beautiful day. And I leave you in my cathedral of trees. All the best to you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.